Bonjour tout le monde. Depuis près de 3 semaines, notre économie, notre démocratie et la réputation du Canada dans le monde font face à des menaces soutenues, coordonnées et financées par l'étranger. Cette situation ne peut être tolérée dans notre pays et elle ne le sera pas. On Monday, Cabinet invoked the Emergencies Act to restore public order. Information is now being shared by law enforcement with Canada's financial institutions. Financial service providers have already taken action based on that information. The emergency measures we put in place are being used, they are having an impact, and they will have a growing impact in the days to come. Les mesures que nous avons adoptées incluent l'élargissement de la portée des règles canadiennes de lutte contre le blanchiment d'argent et le financement du terrorisme, afin qu'elles s'appliquent aux plateformes de sociofinancement et à leurs fournisseurs de services de paiement, et obliger ces derniers à déclarer les transactions importantes et douteuses au centre d'analyse. Exiger que nos institutions financières gèlent ou suspendent les comptes des particuliers et des entreprises liées aux barrages illégaux. Demander aux institutions financières de réévaluer leurs liens avec toute personne impliquée dans les barrages et d'en aviser nos organismes de sécurité nationale. Et permettre les institutions des gouvernements fédéraux, provinciaux et territoriaux à communiquer des renseignements aux banques et aux fournisseurs de services financiers qui permettront de mettre fin au financement d'activités et de barrages illégaux. Since Monday's announcement, I've spoken directly with the heads of our major banks and with the director of FinTrack. My cabinet colleagues and I are meeting regularly, very regularly, including with the commissioner of the RCMP, to discuss next steps. Our absolute priority is ending these illegal blockades and occupation. It gives me no pleasure to impose any of these measures. In fact, we do so with great sorrow. But do not doubt our determination to act, to defend our democracy, to defend our economy, and to restore peace, order, and good government. So let me repeat what I said on Monday. If your truck is being used in these protests, your corporate accounts will be frozen. The insurance on your vehicle will be suspended. The consequences are real, and they will bite. It is time for you to go home. And let me also be clear that we will have zero tolerance for the establishment of new blockades or occupations. We now have the tools to follow the money. We can see what is happening and what is being planned in real time. And we are absolutely determined that this must end now and for good. Before turning to my colleagues, I want to make one additional but unrelated announcement, one that will be welcome news for cities across the country. The federal government will be providing a one-time $750 million top-up of transit funding for municipalities to help make up for some of the pandemic-related operating shortfalls that transit systems have been experiencing. This funding is contingent on two very reasonable requirements. First, that our provincial and territorial partners match the funding we, the federal government, will be providing. And second, that provinces work to speed up their actions to improve housing supply in collaboration with municipalities. Housing is a shared responsibility, and we all have an important role to play. Le gouvernement fédéral fournira aux municipalités 750 millions de dollars supplémentaires pour le financement du transport en commun. Ce financement aidera les réseaux de transport en commun à combler certaines des lacunes causées par la pandémie. Le transport en commun contribue dans une large mesure à améliorer les conditions de vie et de travail dans nos communautés. Nous devons veiller à ce que nos municipalités soient en mesure de faire face aux répercussions économiques continues de la pandémie. Merci beaucoup et je cède maintenant la parole au ministre Marco Mendicino.
Good thing they brought this step for you, Bill. Good morning, bon matin. Thank you for joining us today. I want to begin by highlighting two important developments that happened late yesterday. Last night in the House of Commons, I officially tabled a motion for confirmation of the emergency declaration under the Emergencies Act. And just a few minutes ago, I spoke to this motion during the debate. Over the next few days, I look forward to a very vigorous exchange with members of all parties at this important and unique moment. Along with the Prime Minister and my ministerial colleagues, we will be explaining to Canadians how we got to this point, why the Emergencies Act is necessary, and where we go from here. As always, we will explain clearly and openly how we're acting in the best interests of Canadians. As well, yesterday afternoon, I can confirm that the Emerson border crossing officially reopened. Emerson is Manitoba's most important link to the United States, a vital crossing point for travelers and trade. And with this significant step, I'm pleased to share that all ports of entry on the Canada-US border are now clear of illegal blockades and open to traffic. But I also want to add that this progress is not set in stone, and nor should we assume that it is linear. Yesterday, we saw a group of illegal blockades attempt to return to the Ambassador Bridge to once again choke this vital trade corridor off, and the impact that that would have had not only in southwestern Ontario, but right across the country cannot be overstated. And it can't be allowed to happen. And that's exactly why we invoked the Emergencies Act. Law enforcement must have all of the tools that they need to ensure that these crossings stay open. But I want to be clear that the very targeted tools that we've introduced under the Emergencies Act are time limited, and they are protected by the safeguards which are enshrined in our charter. This means that whether you are a law enforcement, a person, or any other individual that is assisting under the Emergencies Act, that you are bound to act in compliance with the charter. Every day, some $50 million in trade passes through the Coots Crossing. And at the Ambassador Bridge, it's nearly $400 million. It's no exaggeration to say that these illegal blockades have already cost our economy in the billions. But these aren't just numbers, they're jobs for Canadians. It's about the rancher near Lethbridge who sells Alberta beef to hungry families in the United States, or the auto worker at the Chrysler plant in Windsor who builds cars for markets across North America. We owe it to them and to all Canadians to ensure that these vital corridors remain open for business. Au cœur de ce mouvement se trouve la colère, l'animosité et, dans de trop nombreux cas, les armes. Nous le voyons à nos frontières, devant nos législateurs, nos symboles nationaux et dans nos communautés. Nous devons être lucides sur la gravité de la situation. Of course, the Emergencies Act is no ordinary law, but we know that we are in no ordinary time. As former Minister Perrin Beatty said when introducing it in 1988, the Emergencies Act is, quote, an ability to enable the federal government to fulfill its constitutional responsibility to provide for safety and security of Canadians during national emergencies. Keeping Canadians safe is a responsibility that we take very seriously, and it is one that we will fulfill. Thank you. Merci. And I'll pass it over to my friend and colleague, Minister Blair.
Thank you very much, Marco, and Deputy Prime Minister. Always an honor and privilege to be with you. Good morning, everyone. Bon matin tout le monde. I'd like to thank you all for joining us here today to enable us and give us the opportunity to provide an impact and to answer Canadians' important questions on this matter. As my colleagues have said, currently all of our ports of entry with the United States are open. Trades and goods and people are once again moving freely. Travelers and commercial vehicles are getting where they need to go, unimpeded by illegal blockades. And I'd like to take this opportunity to thank our law enforcement partners for safely and successfully clearing these vital passages in British Columbia, Alberta, Manitoba, and Ontario over the past few days. And while we all breathe a sigh of relief, as has Mr. Mendicino shared with you, we know that these blockades could very easily reappear. And as we saw yesterday, as evidenced in Windsor, the intent to harm our economy and hurt Canadians unfortunately remains. I'd like to thank local law enforcement for their swift action in Windsor in preventing another illegal blockade from fracturing the critical economic recovery of this country. The removal of these blockades has restored the strength of our economy. They've ensured that the safe and free passage of goods between Canada and the United States is secure. And most importantly, they have made sure that Canadians are able to get back to work and get their lives back to normal. In Ottawa, we're continuing to see progress being made by the Ottawa Police Service, the Ontario Police, Provincial Police, and the RCMP and all of their policing partners as they work to end the occupation of Wellington Street and downtown Ottawa. Yesterday, Interim Chief Bell stated that officers have been going from truck to truck to advise individuals that they are participating in an illegal demonstration, and they have made it crystal clear that if the illegal demonstrators do not leave, they will face serious consequences. Interim Chief Bell has also confirmed that he is confident that the Ottawa Police Service and the Integrated Command Unit have the appropriate resources, authorities that they require, and a very concrete plan to move forward. He emphasized that this operation will not be considered complete until the streets are cleared, and that peace and order has been fully restored to the good people of the City of Ottawa. To the individuals who continue to participate in this illegal occupation, it's time to go home now. And to those who have children with them, this is no place for children. Take them home immediately. Take them to a place of safety. The Ottawa Police Service and their partners have engaged a planning team with the Children's Aid Society to encourage anyone with children in the area to leave immediately and to take their kids to someplace safe. To the people of Ottawa, I want to assure you, we will continue to work and support with our municipal and provincial partners to make sure that this occupation ends safely and swiftly and respectful of charter and rights and freedoms and upholding the rule of law so that they can get their city back and they can get their lives back. The decision to invoke the Emergency Act was one, as the Deputy Prime Minister said, that we took with great caution and care. And I will share with you as she did. We approached it even with sincere regret. Regret that this was necessary. But make no mistake, we were resolved to do what was required to uphold the rule of law, to protect Canadians' interests, and to defend our country, our democratic institutions, and the people of this country. We know that it was necessary to give law enforcement and our other officials the tools, authorities, and resources that they require to do the job. And I want to assure all Canadians, we will not hesitate to do whatever is required to protect our ports of entry, to protect Canadian interests from the criminal intent of people behind these blockades, and to restore peace and order in our country. And finally, to the people and residents of Ottawa, I want to acknowledge how they have suffered from threats and intimidation, from acts that were clearly intended to bring the greatest disruption to the lives of their fellow citizens, and indeed all Canadians. I want to assure them that this will end and that we will be there for them, to continue to support them and to hold those who have taken from them the peace of their neighborhoods and their communities. We will hold them to account for their actions. Thank you all very much. Merci beaucoup. I would like to invite people who may have questions of myself and my colleagues. Please proceed.
Oui, merci. On va maintenant prendre les questions des journalistes jusqu'à 11h55. We'll take questions from journalists until 11:55, and we'll start in the room.
Hi, it's Annie Bergeron-Oliver with CTV National News. My question is for you, Minister Freeland. You mentioned in your opening remarks that action is being taken by financial services and that's making a difference. I'm wondering if you can provide any specific numbers on how many accounts, either personal or corporate, are being targeted, and also what type of safeguards are in place to ensure that it's protesters and not simply someone with the same name whose accounts are being targeted and frozen.
Well, thank you very much for the question. I have those numbers here in front of me, and they were reviewed just last night by me and Minister Mendicino, Minister Blair, the Prime Minister, and Minister Lametti, but I'm not going to share them with you right now because operational actions are being taken, and we want to be very, very careful not to jeopardize those operational actions. But I do want to assure you, and through you all Canadians, that action is being taken. We are seeing it, and that action is going to increase in the coming days. It's a good question about what are the safeguards, and there I really want to assure all Canadians that that is something very much on our minds. That is something that we and law enforcement and the financial service providers have been working on very, very carefully, and that's why I say the use of the financial tools is actually going to increase in the coming days because it was important for us to be sure that safeguards were in place. And I do also want to say that the actions we have taken are emergency measures. Due process remains in place. Charter rights remain in place. And of course, the courts are there, and these will all be institutions that will be there to support Canadians.
Okay, so my follow-up is in two parts then. So you're confirming that accounts have been frozen, both personal and corporate, but you're not releasing the information. And the actual follow-up is, I'm just wondering whether the bank accounts will be targeted of individuals who donated to the Give, Send, Go and the GoFundMe campaigns. Are they considered designated people under the Emergencies Act, meaning that their credit cards could be cut and financial services are targeting them as well?
Okay, so the names of both individuals and entities, as well as crypto wallets, have been shared by the RCMP with financial institutions, and accounts have been frozen, and more accounts will be frozen. Crowdfunding platforms and payment service providers have started the registration process with FinTrack. In terms of the specifics on whose accounts are being frozen, you now have the regulations. The financial service providers have those regulations as well, and they, working with law enforcement, will be making the operational decisions. But I do want to say really clearly to Canadians, we have now outlined with great clarity that these blockades and occupations are illegal. It is now time for people to go home, to take their trucks home, and to stop funding illegal blockades and occupations.
Yes, Alex Ballingal with the Toronto Star. Just on the same subject, the warning that you're issuing to the drivers about their accounts being suspended and their truck insurance being suspended, is pretty unequivocal. So I'm wondering if you can say or shed some light on whether to what degree, I guess, the large financial institutions are actually on board with this, and also clarify exactly why you can't share the figures, why that's an operational secret at this point.
The Emergencies Act has compelled financial service providers to take these actions, and we have provided them with immunity for actions undertaken in good faith under these measures. Those are two important facts. The financial service providers have a stake in Canada and the Canadian economy, and they are a really important institutional pillar of Canada. They are, as they are legally obliged to do, collaborating properly and effectively with the RCMP, with law enforcement. In terms of disclosing specifics, all of us had a conversation yesterday with law enforcement about that, and there was a clear view that it's important right now not to in any way jeopardize the very important work law enforcement is taking. And that's why I'm not disclosing the specifics, but let me assure you, those details will be disclosed in due course and soon. And I want you to know it is happening. I do have the numbers in front of me. And I do particularly want people who are participating in illegal blockades and in illegal occupation to know these measures are real. They are being used. They will have an impact. And there is a really easy way to avoid being affected by these measures. And that is just go home, go back to work.
And I think that Minister Mendicino, you mentioned that all the border crossings that have been blockaded are cleared. There's been attempts, I guess, to re-blockade them, and that's been part of the justification you guys have used for the Emergencies Act. But you've also mentioned that you want to lift this emergency declaration before the 30-day limit is up. So if the concern is them returning, what are the conditions you need to see, I guess, as a government, as a cabinet, in order to actually lift this emergency declaration?
Well, first and foremost, one of the conditions is that the blockades are no longer there. And that is one of the reasons why we have been going to great pains over the last number of days to send a very clear, unequivocal message to those who are participating in them, be they at a border or in front of a legislature, including here in Ottawa in front of the Parliament, but equally in the communities and in the neighborhoods where these are no longer just mere disturbances of the peace, where there has been a rampant and flagrant disregard for the law. The time is now to stop and to go home. And you've heard me say it, you've heard Minister Blair say it, you've heard the Deputy Prime Minister say it, you've heard the Prime Minister say it, you've heard yesterday the interim Ottawa Police Chief say it. There should be no ambiguity right now to anyone that is still participating in an illegal blockade, whether it's for some under the misguided belief that this is a lawful protest when it is not, or for some other more malevolent purpose. The time is to go home. And the invocation of the Emergencies Act is a resort that we came to as a result of the significant challenges that law enforcement using conventional tools had faced for the last 3 weeks. And while we have made progress, while we see that the ports of entry are open right now, I would suggest that at this fragile moment, it's precarious. I mean, yesterday you just heard Mayor Drew Dilkins in the course of a press conference say that there was yet another effort to try and shut it down again. And so, yes, I mean, I think we all want to be cautiously optimistic that we are coming to the end of it. But in the meantime, as a government, we have an obligation and a responsibility to Canadians to make sure that we are using all of the tools in the box. And yes, that includes declaring certain areas as no-go zones. That includes the ability to commandeer the kind of assets that are required to preserve the flow of traffic at our critical infrastructure, including at our borders. That includes choking off proceeds, currencies that may be used to advance the illegal blockade. And in the case of the RCMP, that includes using a very important and time-limited measure to be able to rapidly deploy them so that we can ensure that there is public safety. So, you know, we're getting there, but we're not quite there yet. And obviously, it is our desire to see the measures that we have introduced under the order sunset as quickly as possible. But that will be a decision that is taken, again, very carefully on the advice of our officials, on the advice of law enforcement, and what we're seeing and hearing on the ground.
Thanks. We'll take one more question in the room and then take questions from the phone. Une autre question dans la salle, ensuite les questions par téléphone.
Oui, bonjour, Laurence Martin de Radio-Canada. Ma question est pour vous, Madame Freeland. Oui, il n'y a pas de problème, prenez votre temps. Sur les comptes gelés, sur les comptes bancaires.
Sur les comptes bancaires, oui.
Gelés. Je comprends que vous ne pouvez pas nous donner de noms précis ou de chiffres précis, mais est-ce que vous pouvez nous donner au moins un ordre de grandeur? Est-ce qu'on parle de quelques dizaines de comptes, quelques centaines de comptes qui ont été gelés jusqu'à maintenant?
Aujourd'hui, on a pris la décision, après une discussion avec les gens qui ont la responsabilité opérationnelle de mettre en œuvre ces mesures, que ce n'est pas le moment de parler avec les Canadiens concernant les détails d'accords gelés. Mais je peux vous assurer qu'il y a jusqu'à ce moment des accords qui sont gelés. C'est un processus continuel. C'est un processus qui va s'accélérer si les blocages, si l'occupation continue.
Vous dites aussi qu'il y a des éléments extrémistes violents dans ce mouvement de barricades, de blocage au pays. Quelles preuves concrètes est-ce que vous avez de ça, que vous pouvez partager avec nous?
C'est l'information que les policiers ont trouvée. En Alberta, à Coutts, ils ont déjà parlé des détails. Ils ont des autres détails qui seront relevés par les policiers du pays. Mais comme le ministre Mendicino a dit, nous comprenons que peut-être il y a des gens qui n'ont pas compris que ce sont des blocages, des occupations illégaux. Et nous voulons dire à ces gens que c'est le moment de revenir à la maison. Mais c'est important aussi pour les Canadiens, les Canadiennes de comprendre qu'il y a aussi des éléments organisés des groupes extrémistes qui font part de ce qui se passe au Canada. Et notre gouvernement ne permettra à ces éléments de continuer de menacer nos institutions économiques, nos institutions démocratiques et notre économie.
Merci. On va maintenant prendre une question par téléphone, ensuite une dernière question dans la salle. We'll take one more question on the phone and then a last question in the room. Opérateur, question s'il vous plaît.
Thank you. Merci. For questions over the phone, please press star 1 on the device's keypad. Pour les questions au téléphone, faites étoile 1 sur votre appareil. La première question nous vient de Émilie Bergeron, La Presse canadienne. À vous la parole.
Oui, bonjour. Une question pour Madame Freeland ou peut-être Monsieur Mendicino. En fait, c'est plutôt sur le débat qui a lieu en ce moment à la Chambre des communes, le débat sur la ratification de la loi sur les mesures d'urgence. On sent, en vous écoutant là, dans le point de presse ici, que vous avez quand même un sentiment d'urgence à ce que est-ce que ça soit adopté, si c'est adopté quand même rapidement en Chambre? Donc, selon vous, ce serait quoi un temps, une durée de débat qui est raisonnable, qui est juste et suffisante? Et à quel moment voudriez-vous que le vote sur la motion qui est débattue ait lieu?
OK, merci pour la question. Je vais commencer, après ça, je vais passer la parole au ministre Mendicino. Et pour commencer, je veux seulement dire qu'un élément important de ces mesures d'urgence, c'est le scrutin dans la Chambre des communes. Nous avons utilisé des pouvoirs qui existent maintenant au Canada, des pouvoirs complètement légaux, complètement constitutionnels. Et pour nous, l'élément de la participation de la Chambre des communes, d'un débat aux chambres des communes et d'un vote aux chambres des communes, c'est absolument essentiel. Notre but aujourd'hui, c'est de protéger les institutions démocratiques du Canada et on va procéder dans une manière absolument démocratique, absolument fidèle à la loi. Et maintenant, je vais passer la parole au ministre Mendicino.
Merci, mais je pense que la ministre Freeland a bien expliqué le processus et la manière de le ton de le débat que le gouvernement veut pendant les prochaines quelques journées. Pour moi, c'est très important de participer dans un débat qui est juste, qui est équilibré et qui est transparent. Il faut expliquer à les Canadiennes et les Canadiennes toutes les raisons qu'on a besoin de prendre cette dernier recours. C'est pas facile, c'est un moment très dur pour tout le monde, mais les mesures qui sont incluses dans la déclaration, dans les ordres, est nécessaire dans la vie de le gouvernement. C'est nécessaire pour les forces policières pour prendre l'action rapidement, mais dans une manière qui respecte le charte, tous les préceptes et les droits dans la charte. Donc, j'espère que les débats vont démontrer toutes les raisons, toutes les explications du gouvernement pour les Canadiennes et les Canadiennes.
D'accord. En suivi, ma question, c'était plutôt à quel moment vous souhaitez que la Chambre vote exactement. Donc, je vais reposer la même question plus directement. À quel moment est-ce que vous souhaitez que le vote se produise? Est-ce que vous souhaitez à tout prix, par exemple, que ça se produise avant que la Chambre ajourne demain, vendredi? Et pour le Sénat, rapidement, parce que c'était ça ma relance, le Sénat donc va siéger demain. À quel moment vous envisagez que le Sénat sera en mesure de voter, lui aussi, une fois que la motion aura été débattue là-bas?
Mais sur la dernière question, je ne sais pas, nous ne savons pas exactement quand les menaces, quand les blockades vont terminer, mais tout le monde espère le plus de possible hier. Mais sur la première question, c'est une question très technique sur le processus de la loi de mesures d'urgence. Et je pense que c'est une question que le chef dans la Chambre vont discuter avec tous les autres chefs les oppositions.
Merci beaucoup. Et dernière question, Marie, allez-y. Au micro. Je pense que c'est pour vous.
Avec plaisir.
Vous insinuez depuis des jours qu'il y a des armes à Ottawa comme il y en a, comme on en a trouvé à Coutts en Alberta. Pouvez-vous nous le confirmer ici, plutôt que de faire des insinuations comme vous le faites depuis des jours? Quel est le plan pour éviter qu'elles soient utilisées quand il y aura une intervention là, qui visiblement se prépare? Puis pourquoi est-ce qu'elles ont pu rester au centre-ville d'Ottawa pendant 3 semaines, ces armes-là?
Mais Juste un important précis, je n'ai pas dit qu'il y a des intelligences ou des informations qu'il y a des armes à feu au Ottawa. Non, mais c'est important, c'est une clarification très importante. Quoi que je viens de dire hier, et même à mes collègues, et qu'il y a des rapportages publics qui démontraient des indications qu'il y a une motivation idéologique extrémiste, entre les blockades. Et il y a des similarités de les cibles, par exemple, les frontières, par exemple, les législateurs et plusieurs des autres infrastructures critiques que la blocade met leur focus sur. Il y a une similarité entre les tactiques que les groupes utilisent sur le terrain, à la frontière, même ici à Ottawa, avant le Parlement. Et il y a une similarité de la rhétorique qui est bien dans le social media et partout. Donc, ça, c'est les similarités que tout le monde partage une inquiétude sur.
OK, donc, vous me dites ici, là, au micro, qu'il n'y a pas d'armes à Ottawa. Mais ce n'est pas ma question de suivi. Et ma question de suivi, s'il vous plaît, c'est sur les enfants qui sont au centre-ville. Vous n'arrêtez pas de demander qu'ils partent. Ils ne partent pas. Certains invitent des manifestants à en amener plus pour empêcher la police de pouvoir intervenir. Craignez-vous une intervention policière où il y aura encore tous ces enfants au centre-ville? Qu'est-ce que vous pouvez faire pour éviter que ça arrive? Parce que visiblement, vos appels ne fonctionnent pas. Puis sur les armes, êtes-vous en train de dire qu'il n'y en a pas? OK.
Donc, première question. Les questions sur les présences des armes à feu et tous les risques, qui ensuite est une question pour les services de policiers. OK? Il y a une différence dans la fonction du gouvernement. Notre fonction ici est pour écrire les lois, d'offrir les outils pour les forces policières, et c'est leur responsabilité pour s'appliquer ces outils et pour répondre à des questions sur le terrain, même sur les risques en relation de les armes à feu. Mais la question sur les enfants est une question qui est très sérieuse. Nous partageons une inquiétude qu'il faut que les enfants quittent maintenant. Et ça, c'est la raison que tout le monde, sur le côté du gouvernement, même les policiers hier, a dit avec une voix très fort, il faut partir. Il faut partir maintenant.
Oui, mais ils ne partent pas.
Oh, merci beaucoup. Vous êtes fini?
Non.
Unfortunately, we really have to cut it off. They have to get going.
I think we're joining Minister Blair for the debate, but we'll be happy to take more questions later. Thank you very much.
Merci. Ceci conclut la conférence de presse.